Good evening, everyone. My name is Alexa Mellis, and I'm the resource editor and a member of the Symposium Planning Committee for the University of Baltimore Law Forum. I'm excited to have all of you here tonight to join us and discuss this special topic. I'd like to thank you all for attending, and I'd like to acknowledge that we have several elected officials here and other important community members, so thank you for joining us. And we are here tonight to highlight the work of a few of the many change makers working to resolve urban blight in Baltimore City neighborhoods. And our goal tonight is to encourage collaboration and conversation between all of the individuals and organizations present here tonight. First, I would like to thank the Law School Administration and Law Forum's faculty advisor, Dean Claudia Diamond, for her assistance in planning the symposium, as well as my Law Forum committee staff, members of the Law Forum Symposium Planning Committee, Markeisha Dobson, Rebecca Gay, Loretto Noguera, Rebecca Gay, and our editor-in-chief, Imani Payne. I would also like to acknowledge Michael Braverman for his assistance in connecting us with all of our speakers and panelists that we have here this evening. Before I introduce our first speaker, who will lead us with some important introductory remarks to set the stage for the panel discussion, I would like to explain Law Forum's decision to focus on blight for our symposium. This spring, we will be publishing an article about Baltimore blight written by Michael DeStefano, a recent UB graduate. But also, Law Forum learned of the passing of 3 Baltimore City firefighters who lost their lives fighting a fire that broke out in a vacant home. This tragedy reinforces the need to discuss potential resolutions to the blight issue. Law Forum dedicates this event to those fallen firefighters. And now I would like to introduce you to our first speaker. She is a longtime community activist and the director of the Upton Planning Committee's West Side CDC, where she has been involved in implementing Historic Upton's 2026 master plan to support the revitalization of the Upton neighborhood. It is a pleasure to introduce you to Ms. Jules Dunham-Howie.
Thank you so much. Good evening. Welcome to tonight's symposium on Baltimore's housing challenges and opportunities from the practitioner's perspective. I'm delighted to be with you for this long overdue conversation. Many of us are so engrossed in our daily work, our heads are down, and we're focused on our own world. It can be difficult to take a pause, look up, and see and hear what others are doing. Tonight is one of those refreshing moments of pause. It is our hope that by hearing the great works, lessons learned, and gleanings from the ground, there will be new nuggets of insight that, when aggregated, can lead to significant impact. Why blight? In my work, I often encounter people who want to blame the community for blight. Blight is a community littered with vacant buildings, which, as Mr. Fannin from the local 964 says, a vacant building is one that is not legally occupied. Let us get it clear tonight. Blight is the byproduct of a myriad of factors. In Baltimore, blight was propagated by suburban white flight, which led to the loss of population, growth of the surrounding suburbs, losses of the manufacturing industry, losses of jobs, and racist redlining practices of the 1930s, denying non-white residents access to home loans and thus home ownership, which continues to this day. All of these factors led to Baltimore becoming a majority Black city. New paradigm or recycled efforts? It's not that the problem of blight has been ignored. The last 40 years brought Mayor William Donald Schaefer popularizing $1 row houses, Mayor Kurt Schmoke removing blighted public housing high-rises, Mayor Martin O'Malley launching Project 5000, Mayor Sheila Dixon proposing a land bank, Mayor Stephanie Rollins Blake pursuing the Vacants to Value initiative. Mayor Catherine Pugh implementing a demolition strategy in an unprecedented bipartisan partnership with Governor Larry Hogan, committing $75 million in state funds to tearing down properties under a joint state and city program called Project Core. And Mayor Jack Young continuing the work in aiding and adding a rehabilitation component. And this brings us to Mayor Brandon Scott's plan to invest $100 million in the blight problem. Mayor Scott plans to commit $56 million to community and affordable housing development in strategic areas, $4 million to prevent displacement among low-income residents, and about $40 million for blight elimination and prevention. I agree with Mayor Scott. The ultimate solution will involve investment in communities to make them places people want to live, and in residents to give them the opportunity to own homes. The billion-dollar question is, how will this investment be managed? Will this be another top-down methodology that has government dictating to community what places people want to live look like? Or will this be a decentralized, community-centric approach, which allows community to dictate their own revitalization? In Upton, we approach our work from a community-centric perspective. We've developed a theory of change that seeks to foster development without displacement. Upton is a West Baltimore community of approximately 10,000 households with a vacancy rate of 28.5%, which equates to 1 out of every 3 dwellings in the community being vacant. The community is highly organized by the Upton Planning Committee, the umbrella organization made up of leadership from the community's 6 neighborhood associations, including Historic Marble Hill, Providence, Edding Street, McCullough Homes, Upton West, and Northwest United Protective Association. UPC also manages the historic Pennsylvania Avenue Main Street program, which is the spine of the Upton, Druid Heights, Penn North, and part of Sandtown Winchester communities. In 2018, UPC launched the UPC Westside CDC as the implementation arm of the 2026 Upton Master Plan, which was adopted by the Planning Department in August of 2018. This entity is spearheading the Upton Community-Centric Development Model, which has 6 critical components: partnerships with public, private, business, and nonprofit partners. And we've created some unprecedented ones. And people said you couldn't bring them all to the table, but we've been able to make it happen. A master plan, a blueprint that actually dictates what it is that we in community want to see for development. And our master plan is comprehensive. Actually, the Department of Planning says it's one of the best master plans in all of Baltimore City from a community. Why? Because it was a $150,000 investment from Wells Fargo Foundation to be able to support that master plan. It takes investment in order to do that type of work. Housing development, we know that we have the blight. So in our community, we're focused on facilitating home ownership. And that is our number one goal, because our goal is to have an Afrocentric community. We're community driven, and we have programs and projects to support that. And we're all about legacy residents and homeowners. And we've created a fund to actually support existing homeowners to address repairs so that they're not pushed out of their home through regressive taxes and through code enforcement. We have commercial development that we focus on. The commercial corridor is what attracts people to want to come and live in your community. And we're revitalizing the historic Pennsylvania Avenue Main Street. And that's about a $300 million revitalization that we know has to happen. And lastly, we're looking at jobs and economic development in our community. And we focused on creating our own Clean and Green team, which hires individuals from the community to clean up Pennsylvania Avenue, to mow lots in the community. And we have hundreds and hundreds of lots that we maintain. And we're also standing up a community maintenance company that will hire individuals from the community, give them a certificate in maintenance, and actually support all of the new homeowners that are coming into our community. Currently, we have 75 houses that are being redeveloped in the Upton community. $22.5 million is being focused on that. And we've garnered resources from the Department of DHCD, Baltimore City, and the Department of DHCD, State of Maryland. And we've created a unique homeownership program, which provides $60,000 through a 5-year forgivable down payment assistance program for 19 homes within our catchment. And this is unprecedented. No one has done this, but it's about providing opportunities for people that look like us to be able to continue to be in this community once it is fully revitalized. So I'm almost at the end. These are just some of the efforts under the way in Upton, but there are other great ideas and insights from other like-minded communities. And so it's time to turn our attention to those stories. It's my pleasure to introduce to you this evening's panel moderator, and I know that you're going to hear some phenomenal work that is happening all across Baltimore City. Jay Green is the former Chief Operating Officer of the Baltimore City Department of Housing and Community Development. His career spans 40 years and includes finance, nonprofit management, affordable housing, and community development. Prior to joining DHCD, he served as the Chief of the Division of Housing for Montgomery County. He served in that capacity for Prince George's County. He served in that capacity for Washington, D.C. He's worked for the Community Builders as a vice president and director of their Mid-Atlantic region. He is steeped, he is rooted, and he understands how you come to this issue in a holistic way. And so he's also credentialed. He holds a BA degree in economics and a master's degrees in urban planning and finance. Yes, that's 2 masters. And so with no further ado, I would ask for you to please welcome Jay Green, who will moderate us and move us through this conversation this evening.
I want to thank Jules for that kind introduction. Yes, I am that old. I've been around the block a few times. First of all, I want to thank the law school for having this event. It's a good conversation to have. We need to have this conversation. I certainly want to thank our panelists for participating. I want to thank the audience for being here and listening and learning and be a part of moving forward. So what I want to do first is have the panel introduce themselves. And then we'll go from there. I'll start at the far end on my right.
Good evening, Ernst Valerie, real estate developer, but with a planning background. So I hate to say real estate developer. I like to say innovator for community. We own a company called SAEVI, and then we have a fund called the Equal Fund that's focused on making sure we have more people of color and more women developing, because the reality of it is 95+% of the resources in real estate go to one small subset of white men, but not all white men. You've got to be part of the in crowd. And the results of that is, not being able to identify with all the beautiful neighborhoods that have a wide variety of people and women. The city is over 50% women and close to 70% Black. And so when you have less than 5% of those resources going to the overwhelming majority of the city, you could expect some issues.
Thank you, Ernst. Next, Clarence.
Thank you, Jay. I'm Clarence Snuds. I had the pleasure to serve as the Chief Operating Officer for Baltimore Community Lending, which is a mission-driven community development financial institution, or CDFI. Was created by the city, the financial institutions and the foundations in Baltimore back in 1989. So it's got 30 plus years. I've been there for a year. I come to this position having been in a number of places, not as many as Jay, but close. I had the opportunity to serve in the financial services industry at a couple of local banks that are no longer around. The buildings are there, but their names have changed, Maryland National Bank and Signet Bank. I was also able to serve at the state level as Deputy Secretary of Housing for the state of Maryland and Housing Director for Montgomery County, and worked with a couple of community development, national community development intermediaries, NeighborWorks and Enterprise. The reason I put that out there is because I have a varied perspective on this issue that we have as a topic for today. And I'm looking forward to adding not only my experience from Baltimore community lending, but my experience from some of those other places as well. So I see myself as a sort of career community developer in looking at this thing from the public, private, and community perspective.
Well, it's really hard to follow up on that one. My name is Steve Preston. I'm with the Parks and People, formerly Foundation, but just Parks and People of Baltimore. I've been in this position for 8 years. I'm fortunate enough to manage all design and construction for Parks and People all across the city. We've been in existence for 37 years this year, with a focus on a variety of programs, but my bread and butter is building parks for communities throughout Baltimore. We specifically focus on communities that have lacked voices for decades. So what's commonly known as the Black Butterfly. And I'm fortunate enough to work with many people in this room from the city level, from the community level. I'm looking at Wanda over here because we're getting ready to open 4 new parks in her neighborhood next week. We really focus on this because we believe parks are and can be the heartbeat of the city. We need to invest in them, and we need to invest in them equitably. So thanks for having me tonight.
Hi, I'm Ellen Janes. I'm the Executive Director of the Central Baltimore Partnership, which is a nonprofit organization that is about realizing a comprehensive revitalization strategy for the 11 neighborhoods in Central Baltimore. We have over 120 active partners. We work together to achieve shared goals. One of the first and foremost is eliminating vacant property, and we've had some great success I'll talk about, particularly in the neighborhoods that are just to the north of the University of Baltimore, Greenmount West and Barclay. UB and Micah Johns Hopkins are 3 of our most critical partners, but our partners range from those institutions, Penn Station, to small businesses, nonprofit organizations, artists and arts organizations, and neighborhood associations.
Good evening. I'm Dante Hickman. I'm pastor of the Southern Baptist Church in East Baltimore, Maryland, with locations in Harford as well as in Howard counties. I've been pastoring Southern now for 20 years, and I'm also the president of our Mary Halvin Transformation Center Community Development Corporation. And most of you may be asking, what am I doing up here and what am I doing in community development? And every now and then I ask myself that question as I was thrusted into community development, not wanting to continue to go into the church, preaching hope and change, but then coming outside of the church and not utilizing the church's resources to actually bring about help to transform our community and to restore the people there. I often remark to people that when I was choosing a career, I tried to choose the thing that had the lowest bar. I didn't want to be a mailman, didn't want to get up and deliver mail, didn't want to be a trash man. It was too laborious, didn't want to be a lawyer, too much reading. And so I became a pastor and found out I'm all of those things and some. So I'm happy to be with you on tonight.
Thank you. So the format tonight is going to be, I'm going to say a few words to tee up the topic. It's tough following Jules, but I'm going to say a few things about Blight. And then I'm going to turn it back to the panel to spend, for each of them to spend at least, around 10 minutes talking about what they're doing and what they've accomplished and how they see the future and what they need help with. So, but I'm going to pause here for a second and I'm going to recognize 2 senior officials at THCD, the Deputy Mayor for Permits and Litigation, Jason Hessler, is here with us tonight. Thank you for coming. And next to him is the Acting Deputy Commissioner. Oh, great. The Deputy Commissioner, congratulations for development, Kate Edwards. And later in the program, we're going to take questions from the audience, and you can direct them to individual panelists, but we'll try to get a conversation going and have a number of them respond to your questions and try to answer them. But we're going to, get back to the city officials before those questions and have them kind of give us an update. There'll be a resource for us tonight. So thanks again for being here with us. Vacant buildings have far-reaching consequences, including becoming a symbol of the decline in some of the city's poorest neighborhoods, along with a significant population loss that the city has suffered since the 1950s. In 1950, the population of Baltimore was close to 1 million people, and currently the population of Baltimore is under 600,000. And this decline has been particularly felt in our historically Black communities, and we have lost a significant portion of our Black middle class. Currently, the number of vacant buildings in the city is slightly under 15,000. This is down from being over 16,000 for many years. And the challenge now is how do we turn the Blight into creative redevelopment opportunities that Jules have referred to. However, more than 90% of these vacant units are privately owned. And these owners have rights. And it's difficult sometimes for the city to acquire these buildings because there's complicated ownership issues that have to be resolved. The city and state over the past several years has spent tens of millions of dollars to demolish most vacant and dangerous buildings. And the need for this type of demolition will continue. But I, for one, don't think that we can demolish or demo our way to a bright future. We have to do something different. And city and state leadership will play a significant role in addressing and coming up with policies to address our blighted conditions. Jules have referred to this. Currently, the Scott administration has made clear a commitment to addressing the complex issue of vacant properties and has produced a city 30-day report on vacant buildings that offers several recommendations. And perhaps our city partners can fill us in more detail. And city council members have introduced several bills to address the issue of vacant buildings. One has been the Blight Elimination Task Force. One is the penalties for failing to abate vacant building notices. Bill has been introduced generally relating to registration fees and penalties for vacant structures. But tonight, we want to hear from key members of our community, non-governmental organizations, their leaders, and their approaches to addressing blight and revitalizing their communities. So I've outlined a few questions. I've taken the liberty to change some of those questions and add to those questions. And through your presentations of what activities you're involved in, maybe you can start to address the questions that I'm about to propose. One is, how do you create a market demand in neighborhoods that contain the most blight and create mixed income communities that will help increase the city's overall population? How should vacant properties be used to create an opportunity for fair market demand, while also addressing the serious need for quality, affordable housing? How do you go about creating home ownership opportunities where property values increase over time without displacing long-term existing residents? How do you create vitality in blighted communities to include commercial development, such as restaurants, shopping, recreation, food options, provide health and wellness services, and entertainment? What steps must be taken to revitalize blighted communities in an equitable and inclusive manner for both minority residents and minority businesses and women-owned businesses, and ensure a place for our legacy residents? And finally, how have your respective organizations collaborated with other organizations in the past and currently to achieve these common goals of revitalization and redevelopment? So it's a lot to unpack, but this is where we are. And this is how we have to move forward. And before I ask the panel just to make their presentations, I do want to recognize that the panel is talented, hardworking, dedicated, but there are many hardworking, dedicated people in our communities grappling with the same problem who are not up on the panel tonight. So we should recognize their efforts and their commitment and their hard work. And the panel tonight is representative of those efforts, but not the only efforts. And because so many people are involved in this, that I truly believe that Baltimore's future is bright. So with that, I'll ask Bishop Hickman to start us off.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Jay, and thank you for your commitment and your partnership and, quite frankly, mentorship across the years. I was probably 2 years in to my pastorate at Southern. The church had already successfully cut the ribbon on its first low-income housing tax credit project for seniors, 59 units for senior citizens in the old brew house of the American Brewery. And at that time, there was a study that was done that said no amount of money invested in this community would work. It would not make it sustainable. And the paper actually wrote an article that it was a neighborhood without hope. And we contradicted that statement to say that it was not a neighborhood without hope, but a neighborhood without help. And the church committed the first $1 million in that $12 million project to show that people did want to live in the community of their rearing and see it revitalized. And that investment drew a $22 million investment in a workforce development agency that redeveloped the American Brewery. That story is not much talked about as a catalyst for development. I came to the church, as I said, to preach. I wanted to build a bigger church and preach across the country and, stay very insular. But I looked at the vacancy in our community that is over 56%, blocks of homes that had been boarded up for 20 years, some now 30 years of blight and vacancy, and said, how did it get this way? And if we were just to rebuild those houses, what would prevent this from being a cyclical event? And then there was the mantra that came to us: we have to restore people as we rebuild properties. In restoring people as we rebuild properties, we're mindful to mitigate against dislocation. What are the real needs and the felt needs of the people in the community so that we can address the human capital while we're addressing the physical capital of affordable housing and public safety and transportation, and nutrition and wellness and education, all of which make for a sustainable community. And I'll end here to hear from other panelists, but that mantra enabled us to develop collaborations with other faith-based institutions in our East Baltimore community in an area that was not being redressed by an East Baltimore Development Initiative plan just south of us, surrounding the Johns Hopkins Medical Campus. That plan literally stopped at elevated railroad tracks that left our communities on the other side of the proverbial tracks. And when asked about a master plan for our community, there were those in the city that said there's not one and there's not one forthcoming. And so it became incumbent upon the pastors, the faith-based community, to develop footprints of influence within that unredressed area, to develop affordable housing and mixed-use development with a covenant not to compete, and where we saw efforts to partner, that we would do so and engage the development community on helping us to build out that footprint to the real boundary in East Baltimore, not a railroad track, but the second largest park in the city, Clifton Park. And that process took us through charrettes, community development meetings with over 300 residents to talk about what they wanted to see and where they wanted to see it, and how we could build off of the gentrification to the south to the natural boundary of the park to the north. And we're proud to say that we were able to have codified the East Baltimore Revitalization Plan that addresses those communities that were unredressed. We've been successful with developing 2 affordable housing projects, and now we're about to break ground on 150,000 square foot health and wellness center and another 92-unit multifamily housing project. And we purchased nearly all of the Blight in our footprint of influence for over $5 million. And my wife and I, preacher says he closed, that means he has 2 more closings. But my wife said, Dante, the slumlord, wasting all of the church's money and going after all of this money to buy up vacant and blighted property. You're wasting money. Until people began to see the real ecosystem of what we're trying to build that can give people a real chance to stay in their community as well as repopulate the community in a better and a more sustainable way. And now she's on my side, and more people are seeing the vision more clearly of what can be done through the vacancy and blight. There's great opportunity for transformation.
So Bishop, you're a faith-based CDC, and just how do you think other faith-based CDCs, the role they should play in their communities in redeveloping them? A lot of times they own land, they own property, they have influence, people trust them. Can you, comment on that?
Absolutely. I think faith-based institutions should be seen and should see themselves as community stakeholders. These institutions were the ones that remained through the suburban flight and the urban blight, have the trust of many of the communities, are not in it for developments of opportunity to inure a temporary profit, but are in it for the long haul to see how we can develop a comprehensive plan of projects that make sense for people to be gainfully employed, to have greater opportunity and amenities and educational opportunities. I think what faith-based institutions know is that the existing residents in Baltimore and those who would like to be in their communities of rearing want the same things that people who live in Roland Park and Guilford want. A quality and safe place to grow their families, to raise their children, to be educated properly, and not necessarily to have to go downtown for everything we need or out of town for everything we need. But like the people in Canton, we can do it within our own neighborhoods. And the faith-based institutions have the vision, have visions, and are trusted partners to be able to collect those unheard and unsung voices, to be able to accomplish things that people only dream and imagine.
One last question from me. Can you just drill down on how you put together that health and wellness center, how difficult it was in the process and how long it took you?
You know, these community development is heavy lifting. And our CPA asked me 18 years ago, Pastor, how long do you think it's going to take? And I said, oh, about a year, maybe two. Well, we're 18 years later. Our Mary Halvin Transformation Center was burned down during the riots after Freddie Gray's funeral. And it really shed a light on the community and the disparities. And we were able to rebuild that project on the date of the fire the very next year. And we had always been looking at our footprint and the myriad of things that need to go in it to make for a sustainable community. A study was done that said affordable housing, a workforce opportunity, education, nutrition, and wellness. And while we have been so focused on building affordable, multi-generational housing, there was a 35,000 square foot Bugle laundry factory that had been vacant and set as Blight for 25 years. And it was offered to the church in the 80s for $1. But the church then had no vision for it. Subsequently, we had to purchase it for over $600,000. It was an environmental hazard. Several of our key leaders told me, stay away from it. It was laundry and cleaning fluid there, and it's a dump. But it was for that reason that I said we had to get it out of the community and create a healthy space. We found out that the lowest basement, the lowest part of the building was not cleaning fluid, but there were buttons where they folded clothes and a refrigerator with a jar of jelly from 1985 and 3 tunnels. I don't know who was planning on getting out of there in an emergency, but we were able to get that property, get the funds to demolish it for another $500,000, and then needed to design the project for another $700,000. And many of you are looking saying, where'd you get the money from? God, it was, we really worked collaboratively with the state, with the city, with corporations like Legg Mason that helped us with pre-development funding, organizations like NIF, the Neighborhood Impact Investment Fund, that really gives you the help you kind of need for pre-development of a project. And it was Hopkins that partnered with us in our Mary Halvin Center with Community Health Services. And one of the persons said, that would be a great clinic. The community needs a clinic. And nutrition and wellness had been a part of our vision. And so we envisioned and designed a 120,000 square foot health and wellness center. And since Hopkins gave the idea, I forced them and fought them to be our first anchor tenant. And they did so not knowing what they would put on the 4th floor of the building, but said they wanted 2 floors of secured parking, which increased the cost of the project to $33 million. We sought new market tax credits. We had to get the right tenants in the facility. We were blessed and fortunate to have just executed a lease with a federally qualified health center that is leasing the balance of the space to bring a myriad of health services into the community. And then after all of that, there's a shortfall of an $8 million gap to build the project. And church members said, this boy is a fool. Where are we going to get $8 million? Certainly not through tithes and offerings. We haggled the governor for the last 2 or 3 years and were able to get $2.5 million in the governor's capital budget. And we worked with Senator Cardin and Senator Van Hollen, Kwasi Mfume. Some of you heard my name and on the news, worked with Donald Trump. I didn't care who gave me the money. We were going to get this accomplished. And we were fortunate on the last couple of weeks to get a $5 million earmark from the federal government through Senator Cardin to close the gap to make this signature project a reality in the community. And it just let me know that when we need 5 and 8 and 10 million more dollars, I can go back to those same people. And I see foundations here. I'm coming after you too. Amen. To root out the violence and the poverty and the murders. This is the kind of investment and development that it takes to change Baltimore.
Thank you. Ellen?
Again, I'm Ellen James with the Central Baltimore Partnership. We are a collaborative organization, again, over 120 active partners. And at any given time, we're working together toward 25 or more goals. Our approach is kind of to throw everything at a community in the effort to achieve the kind of goals that I think we all share that make for a thriving community, opportunity for housing, opportunity for jobs, for small business development, welcoming open spaces, good transit, good education. And we're about creating a sense of possibility, of optimism. I think it's absolutely essential to try to reinvigorate a neighborhood, to create that sense of what's possible. Without it, a downward spiral can quickly take effect, and particularly in neighborhoods like the ones that make kind of a U around our southern boundary, the ones that also are on either side of Greenmount Avenue, where we have significant vacancy. Unless there's a sense that something is possible, all of your community organizations are kind of depressed, and they don't kind of act like the agents of change that they really can be. So that identification of shared goals and then mobilizing people to try to achieve them together, working in ways that they can actually see the effect of their work is really important. As far as addressing vacant property itself, we take, again, a multi-pronged approach. We seek to develop affordable housing, market rate housing, small business opportunity, and welcoming open spaces. So one of the best ways to do that is with a plan. A master plan is one of the greatest organizing tools that I think exists. And if you can break that plan into achievable steps that, again, are visible to the community members that something is possible here, you have a chance to to stop the development of vacancy and that downward spiral. So one of the best tools that we've used, I'd like to focus on two neighborhoods. I mentioned Greenmount West and Barclay, just adjacent here, just to the north and west of UB. Both of those neighborhoods you may have seen have some of the best population growth in the last census, 25% increase in population. And we've done that in those two communities without gentrification. Those communities are as diverse as a community can be. They're diverse racially. They're about 50%, we round numbers, 50% Black and 50% white. They're diverse economically, and they're diverse in terms of tenure. We have newcomers and we have longtime, what Pastor Hickman referred to as legacy residents. So that diversity, though, is fragile. And again, we work all the time to keep that sense of possibility and good things can happen here alive. One of the best tools that we have used is actually called the Greenmount West community has a land use committee. That land use committee has actually been replicated in other of our neighborhoods with our assistance. It's become a committee that meets monthly, at least 30 people, even during the worst of the pandemic, coming together in the last 2 years virtually. But they look at vacant properties in their neighborhood and try to figure out what can happen to them. They also hold investors or developers to account who are trying to invest in their community and make sure that those redevelopments benefit the community. One of the worst things that can happen is when people buy up property and sit on it, just maintaining that vacancy. We also use a number of small tools that have had more impact, way more than the dollars they've cost. One of them is known as Spruceup. We've been trying to work with the city to replicate this program all across the city, but in Central Baltimore, we funded almost 75 projects, and these are those neighborhood parks and playgrounds, even the murals that Greenmount West has come to be known for, lighting for sidewalks and walkways that children in particular use to get to and from school, the library, and to parks, and so on. And we have something called the Crayon Fund, where we give community organizations a few $100s to hold barbecues or food fests or just play dates, basically school giveaways and so on, that build, again, that sense of community. As far as the real estate side of our community or our collaborative approach, I think there you need to take things to scale to have an impact, like the projects that you just heard about. But they don't need to be that large to have an impact. A small group of houses, 10 houses on a block that has 10 vacants can make a real difference. If you focus those houses, say, on a block, rather than doing a house on one block and a house on another, you have a much better chance of attracting new home buyers, of really creating a new, again, sense of community. Also, we've had good success in redeveloping long vacant manufacturing buildings. The Baltimore Design School is one example. City Arts, which is affordable housing for artists. There are two of those. Those were new construction. Baltimore Design School repurposed an old building. Again, you're always looking for these projects that can change the tenor, change the hopefulness in the community. That's our biggest resource, is our people and the way they feel about their neighborhoods. About 3 years ago, we undertook a study where we reached out to the 200 households in our most distressed blocks, and we heard that almost 90% of them, given a choice, would stay in their neighborhood. They felt like good things were happening and that they could be a part of it, and were a part of it. I do want to say that the best strategy, the best housing strategy, I think, particularly for developing affordable housing, is to help the existing residents stay in their homes. Many of our older legacy residents are watching new investment come into the neighborhood, they don't have the funds to invest in their own homes. And so it's remarkable how many people are living in homes in the city without heat, with roofs where they've got 10 or 14 pots catching water, with brick and mortar that's crumbling. And with just a relatively small investment, $10,000, $15,000, you can make that home livable. We have about 30 of those houses underway. We launched a $5 million campaign over 5 years. There are programs like this all across the city, but they're all way limited because of the amount of resources available to them. We wanted to really meet the needs of our legacy residents in a big way. And we've had a lot of success in raising funds to support that program. I also want to talk about another initiative that we have that's really promising, and that is of matching small businesses to long vacant properties. So a big problem in activating commercial properties with small businesses is that nobody can afford to make the improvements to take a building that's been vacant for 10, 20, 30 years and make it profitable. I mean, we're living in a society that is capitalist, and those properties will sit vacant unless somebody pays for that renovation. And so what we've done is gone to the state of Maryland, also one of our best sources of flexible money. Also, the financial institutions in the city have been very generous in supporting this program. And we pay for the fit out for the small businesses. Whether we pay the property owner or we pay the small business, we're making it possible for these businesses to come into these vacant properties. And then we provide those small businesses with other kind of less tangible support, like promotions and festivals and open houses and other marketing, technical assistance on their business pro formas and so on that make sure that they succeed. And again, like with those row houses that I mentioned, where you have to concentrate or focus, same thing with the small businesses. If we can put them together, if we can put them in visible locations on corners, say, or where there's going to be foot traffic, we're basically, and then give them all the support they need, we're assuring their success. As far as the partners that we need, like I mentioned, the state of Maryland, and I have to give credit to Governor Hogan under his administration, and who would think, it's a Republican administration, tremendous support for community revitalization, millions and millions of dollars that are very flexible, easy to use, easy to leverage, match with other funding. The financial institutions, again, philanthropy, I see Bob Embry's here, Able Foundation, first and foremost of the local foundations, has helped support a whole range of strategies for addressing vacancy. But that flexible capital, the ability to grab an opportunity, see a property that's coming on the market and able to move on it before, say, some speculator investor who's just going to sit on it, keep it vacant for years. Also, the ability to grab to mitigate a challenge. We've bought out several problem liquor stores that were causing such disruption in their neighborhood. They were creating more vacant properties. The city has been a really strong partner. Jason Hessler and Michael Braverman, particularly when he was head of code enforcement, were absolutely shoulder to shoulder with us. And again, on that strategic, focused use of resources, just pounding away on problem property owners and forcing them to either improve their property or sell it. The use of a number of creative tools, I hope they'll talk with you about. Receivership, vacants to value, land disposition agreements, all of those have been absolutely critical. As far as nonprofits, there are a number in town. The Community Law Center is one. And those of you who are law students here, I hope you will hear the opportunity that there is for lawyers in addressing vacant property. I can't think of a profession that's more important to us, whether it's pursuing code enforcement, receivership from the private sector or the or on the government side. So I think I'm probably running out of time. I could talk all night, but thank you for having me. It's great to tell our story.
Thank you. Thank you, Helen. Steve, you're involved in quite a different area. So we'd love to hear about what you do and how it impacts community. Because I think, what you do is extremely important to adding value to neighborhoods and making neighborhoods attractive. So let us hear what you're involved with.
Sure. So I guess I'm self-proclaimed, or at times called Leslie Knope of Baltimore, right? Working at Parks and People. And at times it feels like I've been there for 84 years, right? Cracking this egg on vacants is not easy business. You see it all every day. Everybody in this room who's been in this business has seen the good and the bad in neighborhoods, especially neighborhood people on the ground, like Wanda, or like Jules, like Dante. But the way in which Parks and People sort of addresses this since I've been there is I have what I call the war map right up on the wall. And I looked at specifically, thanks to planning, where gaps in the city's park system exist. And then I had sort of a great idea that I bet where those gaps have the most vacants. Well, sure enough, there they were. And I bet that's where the highest crime rates are. Yes, it is. And that's where the hottest temperatures are in the summertime. So this wasn't, rocket science. I sort of had a theory from being on the ground throughout the city that this took place. And so over the past 8 years, I've really worked at treating it like you would treat a cancer, right? I'm working on eating away at where these gaps are through our parks work to go into neighborhoods specifically when invited, which is really key. We talk about equitable development. I've never gone into a neighborhood, and we will never go into a neighborhood unless we're invited. We go into those neighborhoods and we listen. And very much what Dante was saying about a lack of hope and a lack of help. Well, that hope is there, but it is definitely extinguished down to a pilot light. And when we show up and people feel like their voices can be heard and we can help, that's when that flame starts burning and people start coming out of the woodwork to tell us what they want in terms of parks and green space. Ellen, Dante, so many people on this panel do great things in terms of development, and really what we see as redevelopment, or what I call regeneration within neighborhoods, is working from the inside out. So working with these community folks to say, what do you want in this space, and how can we help make it happen? And a great example of that is 5 years ago, Michael probably remembers this. We started with a project with Doc Cheatham, the one and the only, on the west side. He had a dream for a park on McKean Avenue where there was a great degree of violence. I mean, the stories he told me, personally witnessed a car being firebombed there by a drug dealer, was not happy about what we were doing. And we said, we're going to make it happen. So we invested $34,000 there, thanks to the state of Maryland, who's been a great partner through Project Core under Governor Hogan. And we said, we can make a park happen here. We even brought kids from the neighborhood, and they said, I have so many lots in my neighborhood that look like this. I don't think it can ever happen. Well, those kids came 6 months later to that opening, and it was as if that pilot light was a full burning flame at the Olympics, right? They were so excited to see that change that we made happen. And from that, we've been able to take that $34,000 investment, and usually annually we're investing between $75,000 and $200,000 on these vacant lots in communities, predominantly of color, that have been disinvested for years, and being able to make those changes happen. Obviously, it doesn't happen in a silo. As I mentioned, the state has been a wonderful partner. I can't say enough about state DHCD. The city DHCD, also a wonderful partner. They're seeing what we're doing, and they're coupling it with the redevelopment that's happening on many of these blighted properties. I can tell you, Jason, he's answered some messages, but ignore them from me as well, because I'm always calling saying, I have a great idea, right? I'm hearing this from the neighborhood. And that's really important in terms of partnership. Other organizations like Central Baltimore Partnership, right now, we're working on what equates to a $3.5 million renovation of a blighted schoolyard. So we're looking at spaces from blighted housing to blighted schoolyards that can essentially become the new heartbeat of these neighborhoods that have waited so long for that to happen. I'm super excited. Jules is here. I wish Wanda Best was here too, our partner in crime, because next week we're opening 4 brand new pocket parks in the Upton neighborhood on land that's sat blighted for decades. And that just has given such a sense of hope to neighbors who are existing there, but neighbors who are moving into that neighborhood. I'll also say the other great neighborhoods. So that's great neighborhood on the west side, great neighborhood on the east side is Johnson Square. Regina Hammond is a powerhouse in that neighborhood. She will not let anybody develop unless they're going to work with that neighborhood and they're going to listen to what the neighborhood really wants. And I'm blessed enough that I get to work on green space there. We're getting ready to open a brand new interim sports field over across from St. Francis Academy there at the end of the month. So 7 new parks alone this month in the city on vacant, formerly blighted land. I'll just give a quick statistic that since 2015, so I've been at Parks and People for 8 years. So that first year I was getting my feet wet. We have improved or created new green space on 17 acres of formerly blighted city land. And that's essentially increasing the access to parks and green space for 15% of the city's population that did not have that access before. And this year alone, we're investing $7 million on blighted land around the city. And that's anything from blighted land where homes once stood, blighted city parks, blighted city schoolyards. And that's another 14 acres of land that we're turning into positive green space around the city, which is an additional 5% of the population that didn't formerly have it. And I bring this all up because I was fortunate enough last week to go to Atlanta, right? And Atlanta's got it, right? 6 million people, they're investing in their parks. Because they're investing in their parks, they're investing in the properties in and around these parks. And I think that's really key to the success here in Baltimore is we have to invest in these green spaces. After 2 years of a pandemic and everybody being locked up in their houses, I think people really realize parks are cool and we really need them in our lives. And I think going forward, we have to use that momentum and invest in these spaces so that everyone from age 0 to 90 in the city of Baltimore has a great park in their neighborhood that looks just like a park in any other neighborhood in the city. So the parks over in Upton, the parks up above EBDI should be just as great as the parks down in Canton, Fells Point, et cetera, up in Roland Park as well. So I think going forward, we have to use this momentum. We have to look at that as a partnership of everybody on this panel, everybody in this room who does this work every day in order to ensure that equitable development happens in order to keep folks in the neighborhoods who've waited so long for these improvements and help grow our city as well.
Thank you for that, Steve. Next, we have Clarence here, Linder, all right?
Yeah.
So tell us about.
So I thought you were going to ask him some questions. I was waiting. But I'm on. Okay, great.
I'll
So-
wait. Oh, I got some for you.
You got some for me? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Jay. Jay and I used to work together. That's why we're going back and forth. We work together. I mentioned earlier that 33 years ago, the city housing department, the mayor's office, the foundation community came together to create something called Baltimore Community Development Financing Corporation. And out of that, the purpose of it was to create an entity that could be used as a sort of innovative way to address some of the issues that were going on. That was a bit outside of the purview, if you will, of what the city was able to do, and probably not yet into the space that the banking industry was actively working. I'll try to put that kindly at the time. And so this was a sort of in between. So that was 33 years ago. And 2 years ago, the renamed organization, Baltimore Community Lending, did a strategic plan. And the plan came with 5 goals. And I won't go through the goals, but 5 primary goals. But it also came with a theme, if you will. And that theme is reimagining Baltimore, reimagining Baltimore. And in order to get there, I think one of the things that we realize is that we also have to reimagine Baltimore community lending. We have to reimagine it and take a look at what's going on and how we might be able to play a role, not the role that we played over the past 30 years, but the role that goes forward. I mentioned that this is sort of my third tour of duty in Baltimore. I was here working with some financial institutions. I was tapped to stand up something called Community Development Lending back when there was no such term in banking. And so I got some strange looks from my peers. And then I left and came back and worked for Community Development Intermediary Enterprise. And then I left and came back, and I'm back now at Baltimore Community Lending. But one of the things that I noticed going and coming back and going and coming back is what has changed and what has not changed. What's gotten better and what's gotten worse. And I guess maybe it's a sign of me getting a little bit older. If I had hair, it probably would be great, but I don't have hair. So my son's sitting over there, by the way. But so one of the challenges that I have is just the frustration that we've been working at this for so long, working at it, but not solving it. And here's a shameless plug. I host a radio show called Reimagining Baltimore on WEAA 88.9, Morgan State University, 6:30 on Friday. Shameless plug, did you guys see? And we have guests from all over the city, from community development corporations to for-profit developers, city officials that have come and been on the show to talk about the concept of reimagining Baltimore. And a couple of weeks ago, we had Sean Klosky there from Rebuild Metro. And he said something that struck me. He said, there's no problem in Baltimore City where the answer to that problem is not in Baltimore City. There's no problem in Baltimore, I'm paraphrasing, in Baltimore City, that the answer to that question is not in Baltimore City. I see Mark Sisman sitting over there, and Jim Rouse was often quoted to say that what ought to be should be, and then the second part is with the will to make it so. What ought to be should be with the will to make it so. And David Bowers, who's also with Enterprise, is often heard saying, when talking about community development, we're given $1 million tools to solve $1 billion problems. $1 million tools to solve $1 billion problems. And this isn't a problem that has in any of the communities that have been mentioned here that has started, in the last 5 years or 10 years or 20 years or 30 years. It's been around quite a while. In the late 60s, when the urban unrest, we lost a lot of the middle class of Baltimore at the end of that. The population since the 50s, I don't have to tell you, has dropped a third. We've lost a third. I don't know of any other city that could lose a third of its population over that period of time, from almost 1 million people down to right around 600,000 now. So within that, there's a lot going on. Baltimore has been innovative in a lot of things. We created redlining, but also there's some very smart people in the city, kind of getting back to what Sean said. Some very smart people who can help us solve this problem. Working at it is very frustrating. I want to see some solutions. There's a bit of fatigue, some solutions. I want us to solve. The other cities have solved it. Maybe not the way Baltimore should, but they've gotten at it. Boston has gotten at it. Washington, D.C. has gotten at it. Somebody mentioned Atlanta just a second ago. And other cities around the country, they're no smarter than Baltimore. As a matter of fact, I think that there's brilliant people here, a lot of experience, and I think we can address this. But if that coming and going and coming and going, the frustration is still working at it, not solving it. And I think as we look around at Baltimore Community Lending, we want to grow our capacity to be a resource to the players that are on the ground making things happen, the change agents that are on the ground making things happen in a way that's much different than what we've done in the past. And so we're working hard at looking at that. We're looking at We can't do it on our own. We're not on the ground, even though community is our middle name. We're not in the community, but we're with the community. But we have to grow the capacity. We feel we have to grow the capacity in the community in a way that we haven't done in the past. A significant, at a level of change, significant change, impact, transformation. That's what we're talking about. That's what I'm talking about. Getting to a level of transformation in communities. We've been working at this thing, but we haven't solved it. I think we can solve it. I know we can solve it. We have the tools. A lot of things have been created. DHCD has been mentioned a number of times, both at the city and the state level, have created a lot of new things, a lot of products. The question is, can we line them up and get them clicking at the same time and tune this engine so that we can create that impact that we've talked about? We see evidence of it all over the city. Great stuff going on. Can we line it up to create greater equity? When we lost the middle class of Baltimore, white and black, middle class of Baltimore, the economics went out of it. And we have to figure out a way to restore that. This is low wealth. We have to create opportunities to grow wealth, okay? I wasn't a lawyer, I was a business major. And economics was a part of what I had to study. And a part of the problem is economics. Some people don't believe in economics, other people don't believe in science. But that's not what we're here to talk about. So I think in order to get there, we have to take a look at what Baltimore, what is it gonna look like going forward? Is it gonna be a city of 650,000, 700,000, or something else? But we have to kind of look at what we have and where we're gonna go with that and solve the problems that are in front of us. You know, one of the places that come to mind, and I'm kind of rambling, I apologize, but one of the places that comes to mind for me as a barometer for solving Baltimore is North Avenue. From Hilton to Milton, solving North Avenue. Baltimore won't be back until North Avenue is back. And it's not back. We're doing a lot of good things going, a lot of plans in place. That's just one of the places, but there are others. There are others. Jules mentioned Pennsylvania Avenue. That's another place, I think, if we're going to talk about that. A lot of places going on, a lot of things going on. Need to line it up, need to figure out a way to grow capacity. And I want to grow the capacity at the community level in a significant way, in that they have, those folks at the community have the capacity to create transformation in their communities. Folks have been waiting around for a long time. They don't have the, you know, they don't have the finesse and the connection as Bishop Hickman has. They don't have that necessarily. Maybe they do and they haven't called on it. Right? Gotta have faith. But we want to create that. I think, so partnership is one of our strategic goals, is to really grow partnership. We got to grow ourselves to be in a position to help them at the level that we're talking about, at a significant level, a level of transformation. And so we're working with a few partners. We're going to work with a few more. And our goal is to try to figure out a way to help them get to that level, both for-profit and not-for-profit, working in those communities to transform. Not work at it, but to make it happen, with the will to make it so. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you, Clarence. Last but not least, I know Ernst is very passionate about development without displacement and equity and inclusion. And it's always refreshing to hear your passion around these issues, Ernst. So
I turned 45, so I'm a little less passionate now. So I'm actually cheating and looking at your sheet, like what we're supposed to do. A brief overview of yourself and your organization. You know, when I left to go to college, it was like 1995, and that's when, you know, globalization was happening. And Clinton was in office in 96. And I had like a lot of hope, right? And I remember leaving, and before getting in the car, my parents dropped me off 3.5 hours away. And they spent literally 12 minutes on campus, and they just left me at the dorm and drove back. And I remember talking to them, and I said, look, you know, I want to be, you know, I was supposed to be an architect. So I was an apprentice, right? And I worked for this architect, Michael Esmere, in Nyack, New York. You guys may not know Nyack, but I immigrated from Haiti, moved to Brooklyn, and that the $1.50 per square foot Brooklyn, not the $1,500 per square foot Brooklyn, and escaped to Nyack, where one of the last safe havens for hippies. So I knew about yoga and Pilates back when I was 8, 9 years old, and this was like just a wonderful place to grow up. Not a lot of money. All the money was in Westchester, but all the brains were in like Rockland County, right? The people that went to Brown, but like couldn't live in Tarrytown, they lived in Nyack. And it was a really great place because everything was possible there, right? Like, so, going off to college, after this failed attempt to be an architect, because, architecture is about it was explained to me about uplifting the human soul, but having done it, I realized architecture was, the risers are 11 inches and the runs are like there's very exact things that I wanted to achieve with architecture. And then when I sat in my first urban planning course and you start hearing about the responsibility that you have towards people, right? And then this is growing up in a place that gave hugs instead of punishment. And like in Haiti, I went to Catholic school, and the nuns didn't give hugs. They gave punishment. So to be in Nyack and to study urban planning, and then I said, planning is not like the solution, right? Because you could have brilliant planners, and I've met some brilliant planners, but politics makes decisions, not brilliant planners. And so I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go make policy. So I did that first master's degree in public policy. And then you realize, wow, public policy, to make policy, it takes 10 years. And by the time, you actually have a piece of policy that's gone through the system and it's law, who's going to enforce it, right? And then I said, this sucks. Right? Like, how do I actually make things happen? And Columbia had this program in real estate and business. And I'm like, wow, these developers, somehow they know how to move the politics and somehow they can put all these projects together. I want to be a developer because, I don't have to wait a long time and I don't have to be this brilliant person that's frustrated and can't get anything through like the planning department. So I went in and I was all in on becoming a real estate developer, did this program. And I was in San Francisco at a ULI conference. And at one of the tables, it said Baltimore. That's all it said, Baltimore. And there was one person standing behind that table, and it was Otis Foley. And we started talking to him. And he basically was a really engaging guy. And we're like, look, come and have a drink with us. Like, we think you're a cool guy. And he's like, look, I'll have a drink with you guys, but you have to promise to come to this place called Baltimore. And I remember making a joke. I'm like, look, DC is where the president lives and Philly is where I started my business. So there's a whole segment of the story that I'm skipping, but I started as a 22-year-old renovating row houses in South Philly and made a lot of money doing it. And I was shamed by my leftist professors at Cornell who came down, and one of them was going to go head the planning department at Temple. And he said, we thought you would be one of the good ones and you're just gentrifying neighborhoods. And I'm like, he used the G word on me. And then, when you reflect, I was buying one row house in South Philly and the rest of the block would be vacant and I couldn't get the rest of the block done. And I had learned that if you've got vacants on your block, insurance is more expensive, security, the perceptions and everything. Like your insurance goes from $1,000 a year to like $200 a year if you actually had no vacants on the block. So I couldn't do the whole block. So I went and I convinced a bunch of other suckers that were in like trucks, I'm going to buy 5 and you come buy the rest of them, right? And like they did. And overnight we were turning these blocks from like things that were like 25,000. My first closing in Philly, I walked in, bought something for 50,000. The guy was like laughing at me. He's like, last year I bought it for 5. You're an idiot. And you have these Ivy League degrees. And I'm like, okay. 6 months later, taking care of that entire block, we were able to sell things for like 180, 190. right? It was gentrifying, right? And like that, I felt horrible about that, right? And I like, this isn't the person that I wanted to become, because in my heart, I'm an urban planner. I always, I'm ashamed of being a developer, right? It's like, I want to be this planner that wants to create great communities, and make sure that everyone belongs in those communities, right? So back to the Otis story, I come to Baltimore, and when I get to the planning office right there, and I walk up, I go up to like whatever floor, and I asked for Otis, and they said, Otis, you mean Director Raleigh? I'm like, director of what? What is this man director of? The planning department. A light went off, and the joke was, DC is where the president lives. Philly is where, I started my business. New York is where everyone wants to be and where I'm from, right? But like at the end of the day, at all those places, DC, Philly, New York, I had never seen a young Black man who's brilliant get recognized for it and be the head of the urban planning department, right? And because that was possible, I made plans to move to Baltimore right after grad school, right? Because I felt like this was a place where so much is possible. And I moved to Baltimore. Otis toured me around. I saw all the neighborhoods. I moved to Baltimore. I actually switched my thesis at Columbia from some research thing that I was going to do to an actual project, which was the old medical arts building. It was like, let's go buy this building. It's only $3.6 million. That's thinking like a New Yorker, because in New York, a parking spot is $3.6 million. So they were about to give me 128,000 square feet for $3.6 million. And I came down and we couldn't get a loan. So we partnered with some folks. And we basically, that was the first deal that I did in New York, here in Baltimore. And I came down with one kid. He was 10-month-old. My oldest is 16 now. And so I've been here for 15 years. So that's how I remember. And we did that project. We also did Milk and Honey. I lobbied my wife every night to open this cafe with me. I don't want just another greasy spoon on the ground. I think Baltimore would do well with this cafe and welcome it. And they did. We started Milk and Honey. And, I have this passion for this city. And, I've always taken risk to make this city better. Right? Every time we do a project, every time something comes out of the ground, it's because we put our family on the line for it. But we love this city. I have 3 kids in this city. 2 of them are from Baltimore, one's from New York, but the New Yorker is a real Baltimore kid, right? And he loves lacrosse and he loves public school. I actually gave him the option to go to Gilman, and he said they're not as smart at Gilman as they are at Poly. Which was, wow, okay, this kid loves Baltimore. So we're here to actually make change in this city. And in 2019, I lost my mom. And that's actually the smartest person that I know, my mom. And she's from Haiti, this little town outside of Port-au-Prince, actually far from Port-au-Prince. And in her town, women stopped their education in middle school, and then they picked up a trade. So she knows how to sew, but, she wasn't allowed to go to Harvard Business School because she was a woman. And any business decision I ever made, any project we ever did in this city, she blessed it. And if she didn't bless it, we didn't do it. The one thing she didn't bless was my mom grew up in a family of Catholics. And when we did Ministry of Brewing, she said, "You're going to hell." But I'm like, Mom, it's desanctified. It's okay. They took the relic out and everything. We're okay. But it wasn't okay. But she died in 2019. And, I'm thankful for that because she missed COVID. And it would have been painful to go through that and not be able to be with her. And then in 2020, the world went crazy, right? We had the Me Too movement. We had Black Lives Matters. Our Asian brothers and sisters were getting attacked and being blamed for something that wasn't their fault. The world was really crazy. And I remember that 4th of July, I got a phone call from a couple professors at Columbia. And they basically said, In 2019, we think we're in trouble because in 2019, not one Black person graduated from the same program you graduated. And we look back, we had to go back 15 years to find you. That's actually an entrepreneur, right? And at that point, I realized all the great things that we do, it wasn't enough. We needed to supersize and kind of like energize what we were doing. We needed to multiply. Like, we're just so few trying to do so much. And I realized, and I'm going to use Sean's quote, right? There's nothing that's happening in Baltimore where the solution is not already in Baltimore. So that was our inspiration to start the AQUO Fund. AQUO, Latin root, level, field. And the goal of that fund was, yes, it's great to have us doing some of these projects, but we really have to start small. Like, how does I'm going to get corny, right? A great mighty waterfall starts with one drop. And so we had tried to do this developer apprentice program, but the AQUO Fund to us meant, how do we get the people that traditionally don't attract capital, but are brilliant, right? And can actually change their own neighborhoods. And we said, we're going to invest in people that banks just say no to. They always say no. And that's because, they get the nice fancy commercials that say, we're reinvesting. But at the end, if your credit score has to be a 725, they know exactly who they're excluding. And they've been doing it for the past 50 plus years. And we let them get away with it. We do the Community Reinvestment Act, but they find ways around that. And like, you guys are the legal minds. And so there's some questions I want to ask. When a bank says we're reinvesting and they give that money to a nonprofit and that nonprofit qualifies them as investing in their community, but then they create rules for that nonprofit that are basically an extension of redlining, I call it fraud, right? Like, is that too powerful of a word? Like, you're defrauding the entire system to get CRA credits, but then telling the people who just made that possible that the people need to like have a 650 credit score. And I always say 650, that's a hipster whose parents still pay their credit cards, right? 650 is not normal people that come from these impacted zip codes. And so when we created the AQUO Fund, we said, let's leapfrog this entire system. And I've seen that done a couple places, like I'm going to sound bougie now. I got to live in Italy for a whole year, and half of it was a semester abroad. The other half was carrying this really brilliant professor's suitcase around. And we watched people take 6 months, 3 to 6 months minimum, to get a phone line installed in their house in Italy, right, in Rome. And at some point, they created the cell phone, and it drove the, Tele Italy out of business because no one wanted to deal with that crap, right? They just got cell phones and they leapfrog. And I was like, that's an example of leapfrogging. And so we created the AQUO Fund because we want to leapfrog the current financial system. There are banks, and listen, they work for the people that they work for. Everyone remember PPP? Like, all their clients, the people that they work for, all got PPP loans. But the majority of the people, the majority of all the small businesses suffering, they either went out of business or they couldn't get PPP loans. Folks weren't calling them saying, we got it all ready for you. And they were asking them for documents that they knew they didn't have. So I think that was bad policy. How do you design something that you know is going to escape and like not touch the majority of your people? And so I'll leave it there. I think, my action is, how do I create a fund that is going to recognize the brilliant people already in this city? And how do we invest in them? And how do we focus that on women and minorities? Because those are the folks that aren't getting any investment. Less than 5%, that's actually being generous. And so that's what I want to do. I want to fund. I don't want to call it a revolution because I just want to fund what's right. But, what's right is that more people should have access to capital. And if the financial institutions won't do it, then we should leapfrog them. And I also want to recognize that in 2021, the year we started the AQUO Fund, we did 110 projects. Think about that. And we started with $5 million with enterprise and reinvestment fund. It's always reinvestment fund. They're the ones that listen to my crazy ideas when we did the Chesapeake. They're fun to work with. And, just think about the millions and millions of dollars that have been spent on people to come save Baltimore. And $5 million that was spent on Baltimore people. 110. And I want to compare my score to theirs. And I don't think they want to, but at the end of the day, I think if we spend more money on the people of Baltimore, if we actually invest in them, whenever I say to people, the Equal Fund is a fund that supports women and minorities, people go straight to, oh, it must be a program, like a handout program, let's feed you, as opposed to an investment. So let's start investing in Baltimore people. And let's give them the opportunity to fix their own neighborhoods. We can't be the ones. And that's starting with some of the smallest projects and getting rid of this 14,989 vacant units. And, I also want to recognize that in a lot of what we've done, so the projects that we've done in Baltimore with Dean, we had a lot of help from the city and the state. And we also had the most amount of help from the neighborhood, Wanda and Jules, just standing up with us and believing in home ownership. If we don't, we have an opportunity and no other city has that to create incredible amount of homeowners. And Dean and I when we went to our first closing, it was postponed twice. 40 days it was postponed because they kept on doing appraisals because they could not believe that we could get those appraisals in a black zip code. There's something wrong with that system. And we actually changed it. We changed that because the second closing was easier. And so it's going to take us working together. And I've learned something a lot about sort of working together, especially in the last couple months, working with you, Ellen, just, the miracles that Ellen, she's the new gangster in my life because some of the resources, and I've always been this loner, right? It's I'm going to do it myself type of thing. And then what I'm realizing is if we don't work together, we're not going to solve this. So the two key things is working together, putting all these systems together. And the second thing is investing in people from this community. Folks go off in Baltimore and they do great things. I get to watch these wonderful kids at Poly. They're so smart. They're so talented. Did you know our girls basketball team won the state championships at Poly? These girls are just amazing young women and they're going to go off. They're going to go off to great schools. We want them to come back to Baltimore and build this wonderful city and make it the greatest city in America. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ernst. Thanks. We do want to have time for some questions, but before we get to the questions, we wanted to certainly give our DACD partners an opportunity to, give us an update or share some thoughts with us.
Oh, this one's on. Okay.
You deserve a promotion.
They don't last very long. But as a 2L at UB, I filed my first receivership case in the community development clinic. As a 3L, I did a semester at the community law center where I filed my first nuisance abatement action. And in the summer between 2L and 3L, I tried my first case as a lawyer, Rule 16 lawyer with a UB SPY grant with Public Justice Center, doing landlord-tenant work. That's what I wanted to do. And I was lucky enough to get a job at Baltimore City Department of Housing, where I got to work with people in the community every day doing that work. I started out as a staff attorney in October of 2001. And somehow stupidly stopped doing that stuff and climbed up the ladder to be deputy commissioner for permits and litigation. So When Ernst calls and he's got a problem getting a use permit, he calls me. And when Steve calls because he needs a wall built so a park can go in and the kids can be safe, he ends up calling me. And Clarence never calls me, so that's fine. But like Ellen said, we need lawyers in Baltimore City doing community development work. Whether you're investing in the community or helping the community, close down an alley or shut down a drug house or representing tenants in landlord-tenant court, that's what we need. And our doors are open, so come on down to 417 East Fayette Street. As an update, I think Kate's going to talk a little bit about the mayor's $100 million investment in housing. I'm going to let you know about the Vacant study that went on just really quickly. After the firefighters passed, the mayor announced that there was going to be a 30-day review and a study. And we met several times every week with Department of Public Works, CEO Shorter, Department of Planning. Who else was there? There were a bunch of people. It was like every agency that we possibly needed their help from. And what happened is a lot of the things we were already doing have started getting some more traction in the city. A big thing we've been pushing for years is help from the courts. We can file tax sale foreclosure cases against properties that nobody's really interested in, but to get them through the court is over a 2-year process. With the help of the law department and the courts, they've committed to a faster process where we should start seeing properties get through in 3 to 6 months. And that helps with the legislation that recently passed at the state level and the city level to do in-rem tax sale foreclosures. So this wound up getting more property into the hands of the city where we've cleared the title up and we can transfer them to somebody to do some of the wonderful development projects that were talked about here. Since 2016, we've taken down over 3,400 buildings through over a $50 million investment by Baltimore City and a $33 million investment from Project Core. That's more properties in that 6.5-year timeline than in the other 14 years I was at housing. With the Vacant program, we're streamlining some of that work so that we can hopefully do more. We're doing little things and big things that will impact how we go after vacants. But with a demo of 3,400 buildings, in 2016, when that started, we were at 16,986 vacant buildings. This afternoon, we were at 14,949. I know it's a room full of law students, but that math is, it doesn't add up. We're gaining vacants because at that same time, we also got 7,000 use and occupancy permits. So it's not enough to just demo properties, receiver properties, do in-rem cases. We need this development. Maybe the only thing that's not in Baltimore is more people doing the work and more money. We've got some money coming in, but those are the two things I think that Baltimore probably needs is the money and the people moving in so we can pump that 600,000 population up and fill some of those houses that are empty. Kate?
Hello, everybody. My name is Kate Edwards, and I am the Deputy Commissioner for the Development Division. And I'm really happy to be here, really honored to be here, because all these people who are on the panel here are the people that are doing the work that we're trying to support. But everything that we're doing is really for the type of work that these folks are doing and that many other of our partners are doing throughout the city. So in the Development Division, we handle acquisition and disposition of city-owned properties. So we're doing the in-rem foreclosures that Jason spoke about. We have a legal section that handles that. I, too, have a background in law. So maybe 5 years ago or so, I was also right here. Well, not at UB, I was at Maryland, but I was in law school finishing out that part of my career. And my background before that was in planning. So I actually started 15 years ago in the planning department under Otis Rowley, as Ernst talked about Otis earlier. He was my first boss here in Baltimore City. So I have a long background in Baltimore. I've been the planner for East and West Baltimore, and now bringing all of that together, the legal side, the planning side, all of the community work that I've done over the years is all coming together in my job now in the housing department. And so we're really focused on working directly with communities. So we have our impact investment areas, and this is something that was created several years ago in our community development framework. And that was under our previous commissioner, Michael Braverman. And we've been continuing that work. And these are areas that have been identified. It's in East Baltimore, West Baltimore, Northwest Baltimore, Southwest Baltimore. So all of the areas that really have suffered from redlining, suffered from disinvestment over the years. And we're trying to really guide new investments in these areas and making transformative change in these areas. So one big part of it recently announced by the mayor, he talked about the $100 million of investment in the ARPA funds in housing projects. This money is going to really supply crucial funding to all of these areas of the city that I just mentioned. Some of this funding is directly for infrastructure that's going to support several key major redevelopment projects. So this will be in Park Heights, Coldstream Homestead, Montebello, Uplands, O'Donnell Heights, and Perkins Somerset Old Town. So those are a lot of our major redevelopment areas where we have really large scale projects that are going to be funded with this ARPA funds. And then additionally, the money will support those impact investment areas that I was just talking about. And that's going to be money that's going to go directly into really making that change in these neighborhoods, acquiring vacant properties so that we can get them back into productive use, and also supporting redevelopment of those properties through incentives for our development partners, and also supporting the current homeowners and residents of those areas by providing homeowner incentives. So that would be money to help homeowners make repairs to their properties. So all of this is really going to be crucial and really give us that boost that we need to make the difference that we've been working on for years now. For 2 years, we've been meeting with these communities, month after month, talking about and creating implementation strategies in those areas. And this money is going to help us get started on that work. So again, I'm just really happy to be here tonight. And thank you for including me in this.
Thank you, Kate, for that update. Now we have time for some questions from the audience. There's a hand right here.
Sure. So I'm looking to go into immigration law. I'm the law student here at Testing. Okay, cool. I'm going to law school here. I'm thinking about going into immigration law. I managed to get an externship at the Esperanza Center down in Fells. And I'm excited about that. I'm also a transplant from the West Coast. So I'm wondering about two groups of people who could potentially come in and fill up all this housing. One is immigrants. And a lot of that's kind of in the hands of the federal government. But I would nonetheless like to hear what you think of immigration policies role in revitalizing Baltimore, and also capitalizing on the housing shortage that other big cities are experiencing right now. A lot of big cities are not dealing with blight. They're dealing with a lot of housing that's perfectly good, so good that, poor people end up on the sidewalk instead of inside them. And they're also dealing with young people, college grads, leaving because the rent is too high for them at that point in their career. So people from other big cities who are being priced out, and immigrants is what I'd like to hear about.
I'll go because I'm an immigrant. So I, 6 years ago, we started a platform called Pathway to Stay, and we worked with a couple of my friends who were immigration lawyers. And the same kind of thinking is like, we really need to have Baltimore, because like when we resettle people in this country, we send them to like the middle of nowhere, right? And I feel like bringing him here and the proximity to DC and to be able to because DC is like this cultural center where they could have their embassies or whatever. So I think that's a great idea. And then today in the interview we had outside, someone said, is this a problem having like all these vacants? And I'm like, I don't see it as a problem. I see it as an opportunity for Baltimore to lead and being able to create a lot of homeowners, especially homeowners of color. So I see our issue as a real opportunity if we ever came together and kind of, vertically integrated. And, this meeting is a really good first step to kind of say, hey, we're all in the room, right? And let's do something about it, right? And let's come together and make sure that this is a real opportunity to house people and to make them homeowners and to make them stakeholders and for them to be able to like build equity as well. So like after they buy their home, to be able to have it appraised for more the following year, as opposed to buying in a county where, maybe it goes up 1% a year. But here, certain neighborhoods like Station North, Greenmount West as a case study. And I remember planning and the ACD coming in saying, we're going to focus on this corridor. Are you in? And then we had Central Baltimore. And, before you, there was Joe McNeely, but then with Ellen saying, let's get to small businesses. So it's not only the homes, some of these vacants are on sort of like these commercial corridors. And, the thought is, how do we make some of these small business owners stakeholders as well and like owning the building? And then the other piece of it is artists and students, they come and they make a neighborhood and then they never buy and then they get kicked out, right? So they create the value and they make it a place because they're inherently cool people. And at the end of the day, they can't get to stay there. We've got to change that as well.
I agree.
Go right.
I was going to say, I 100% agree with you about the power of immigrants to revitalize the city. And I think Baltimore has to do a much better job in creating a welcoming city. Right down the road in Montgomery County, they have a remarkable array of programs to welcome immigrants. For example, they help people learn English so that they can pass licensing exams. So med techs and nurses and doctors can come here, learn the English that they'll need to practice their profession. They offer incredible English as a second language programs, not just for children in school, but for their parents. At night, you see lines going into elementary schools of adults trying to learn English. We can do that, but we need to create that welcoming culture. We haven't done a good job. And I, being from the area that's just around the train station, we totally see the advantage of being able to attract people from not only Washington D.C. but the corridor. Even Prince George's County, people are feeling priced out, and we should. Again, those are people who have choices in where they live, and if we can figure out how to welcome them, they can add a lot.
And a critical part of our master plan is creating affordable housing and changing the homogeneous type two-story row homes that are in abundance in the city, 85%. There's an opportunity to densify the community with a greater population through high density housing, as well as diversify the incomes. You can't stop gentrification, but I do think you can build off of it and do what I would like to call diversification. I think we have to reimagine Baltimore with integration being our greatest focus, not just in the color and the race line, but in the income line. If we can have mixed income projects where people who can afford a property at 70% AMI can live with people at 40, 50, 60%, some 30% AMI. I think this is the kind of community and product that will bode well for everyone. And that there's a dearth of that in the city, and the widespread vacancy gives us that opportunity to create that kind of product.
I think we have time for one more question.
Hi, my name is Sharonda, and my question is reference to, I work in the city, and I worked in both housing and I work in the Office of Equity and Civil Rights. 15% of our population in Baltimore City has a disability. We have the Affordable Housing Trust, and we also have $100 million. Will there be incentives for accessible housings for persons with disabilities as we look forward in diversifying, because equity includes accessibility as well?
We're looking to the city to answer.
Yes, so a portion of the Affordable Housing Trust Fund does go to fund our HUBs program, which is housing upgrades to benefit seniors. So that funding can be used specifically for helping the populations that you're talking about. And then as far as the broader investment, we're still figuring out exactly how those incentives and, are going to be used. So I think it's something that we can consider for further, what other ways we can address that.
Thank you. Now to close this out, we're going to hear from Jules again.
Part of the issue is there's never enough time. Never enough time when you talk about such a riveting conversation as Blight. But it really is a critical issue for Baltimore City. And tonight, I hope you gleaned some nuggets. Did y'all glean some nuggets? Okay, all right then. I gave you the assignment early. I said, you're going to get some nuggets tonight. So here are a couple if you didn't get them. I got a whole page of nuggets, and I'm going to go in 1 minute and get you these nuggets. First of all, there's a direct link between vacant buildings and really crime and critical issues within community. And so we have to have strategies that effectively combat this very real issue. And tonight, I believe not only did we hear strategies, but we also heard some solutions. What were they? We heard that in Baltimore City, we've got a Blight task force. We have to think about penalties. We have to actually restore people and homes. We have to think about transit-oriented development, reclaim the Black middle class. Private, public, philanthropic, faith-based NGO partnerships are a must. Economic development revitalization, we can do it. NIF is a good partner. Reinvestment Fund is a great partner. Affordable multi-generational hierarchy has to be thought about. Legacy homeownership support is critical. Small business pipeline needs to be created to help create growth in our communities. Flexible acquisition capital is needed. Equitable development can be done. Recognition of our neighborhoods and their green spaces are assets in the community if they are manicured beautifully, like parks and people. Grow capacity. Grow the capacity of the nonprofit folks who are working on the ground. Grow capacity of Black and brown developers that are working to revitalize their communities. Create wealth growth in communities. Planning, public policy levers must be used to facilitate equitable development. Think about concepts as the Aqua Fund, leveling the playing field and leaping forward for people to be a part of the development process in community. We have to make sure that we are not propagating redlining and the redlining tactics, which, yes, are still alive. And lastly, I heard, and it's true, you got to be a little bit gangster to get this work done in Baltimore City. And we don't mind being gangster. Because it's called by any means necessary. So lastly, I want to say to you, we need to think about how to deploy not one of these strategies, not one of these solutions, but all of them. Why not? Why not robust Afrocentric neighborhoods full of people again? Why not row after row of renovated row houses? Why not build new housing in some of the vacant lots? Why not beautify manicured green spaces? Why not urban gardens? Why not state-of-the-art schools? Why not attractive bedroom communities for people who work in Washington, D.C.? Public transportation does work. Why not affordable housing, market rate housing, small business development, diversity without gentrification? Why not a reimagined Baltimore? We have the will to make it so, and we can achieve transformation together. Thank you for being with us.
Thank the panel. Thank you, panel. Give the panel a hand. Thank yourselves for showing up.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rebecca Gay. I'm the managing editor of Law Forum, and that's tough to follow. But I wanted to thank everybody for coming this evening. It was a very dynamic and wonderful panel. So thank you for joining us, and thank you, Jay Green. And I have the good news to let you know that there are food and drink in the lobby waiting for you. I only ask that you use that left door because the food is set, or the bar is set up there. So let's continue the conversation outside and mix and mingle. Wow.